Hello, 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 and welcome to the very first episode of Media Storm, introducing Media Storm from the House of the Guilty Feminist. And please welcome your permanent hosts, Mathilda Mallinson and Helena, Wadia.
Thank you,
Hello.
Deborah.
I'm delighted to say that you're joining the House of the Guilty Feminist to deliver a brand new podcast. Could you tell us what is Media Storm?
We're journalists, and this is an investigative journalism podcast, but we are taking a different approach to old stories that crop up time and again in our news. And that is by looking at them through the lens of the people who live those stories, the people whose voices you almost never hear,
but who are spoken about over and over and over again.
If journalists do speak to people with lived experience, their accounts are often thrown in as case studies. The people we speak to have more to offer than their experience. They have the expertise that comes with experience. They have informed opinions, often more informed and less agenda-driven than the politicians and corporate reps that do get all the airtime. That is the capacity in which we will be speaking to these people on Media Storm.
So how did you come up with the idea for Media Storm?
There's something called right of reply in journalism, right? It's the most basic principle that is taught to you pretty much as soon as you enter into any kind of journalism degree.
Day one.
And it's pretty much one of the first things you hear. It's giving people the chance to respond to comments or allegations about them. But a lot of journalists seem to forget right of reply when it comes to minority groups. And that is because of how routinely dehumanized these minority groups have become. Now, a lot of people will probably say, oh, but the articles I read always have both sides and the TV that I watch always have both sides. But that's kind of the problem now. This principle of getting a comment from both sides has been essentially manipulated or, distorted. You can, for example, have a both sides on the Mayor of London expanding the ULEZ charge. So some people will go, yeah, that's really important because we need to clear up London's toxic air. Other people will go, I don't know, that puts too high a cost on people who require a car for work or family reasons. That's something you can have a reasoned debate about. Yet some editors and journalists now use the idea of both sides and apply that to fundamental human rights. So we're now seeing debates on TV and in papers about whether trans people should be able to live comfortably
or even exist,
or whether black people really do face discrimination. We're now seeing debates of this. It's got to the point that I wouldn't be surprised if I turned on the TV and there was a debate of somebody saying, yes, we do breathe oxygen in, and somebody saying, no, we don't.
So when Helena and I were working together, we used to grumble whenever we were feeling frustrated by the style of coverage. I think the peak for me was the summer of 2019 when, quote, channel Migrants started trending again. And we must have published, 30 articles in a fortnight on refugees, not a single one of which featured a single refugee. But what that means, right, is our readers are having this extreme form of immigration explained to them by people who've never done it. I felt like we weren't giving our readers very good information, maybe, and we were also failing on the first tenet of journalism, which is right of reply.
There is such a significant lack of diversity in newsrooms. When media organisations fail to address this lack of diversity and fail to address actually also unconscious bias and inclusion, the standards of reporting from those newsrooms suffer. They really do, because I've been in newsrooms of big organisations where I can count the people of colour, myself included, on one hand, and that should not be happening. And I've pitched stories and been told, that's not really relevant. But really what those mostly male, mostly white editors are saying are, that's not really relevant to me. But if there were more non-white, female, transgender, gay, working class people at the top of these organizations, then those stories are going to be relevant. They are going to be talked about, and they are going to really help people. And if you see journalism as something that helps people by delivering accurate and up-to-date information to the masses, then you got to include all the masses, you know?
So what's the tone of the show? What should people expect when they tune in?
We kick off with an investigation, and you, the listener, will be with me or Helena or both of us that whole way. We'll take you to the scene of the crime, so to speak. You'll meet people with a kaleidoscope of experiences, and we will use their insights to answer one big question that we think the media is failing to ask.
So that sounds like it's got like a true crime feel to it, where when you said the scene of the crime and I'm following you and going with you, I'm really excited to come with you on your journeys to find out what's happening.
Well, thank you. So what we wanted was for listeners to feel like they're on that road with us, to kind of see the process, to think about the questions we're asking, and then maybe be equipped with some tools as to how to answer them and who to speak to.
And will it all be in the field?
So in the second half of the episode, we'll then be able to kind of shake off some of that heaviness of the investigation. And we're going to be back in the studio with some special guests where we'll have a really open and honest and frank discussion about the way that the wider mainstream media reports on that topic. And it'll be a bit of a roasting of some of the headlines that are that have been doing the rounds in the previous weeks.
So the first part of it, we're going to get in the investigative journalist van with you and become investigative journalists alongside of you. And in the second part, it's going to be more like a great conversation in the pub, but with somebody who really knows and has lived this topic. Well, that sounds like a podcast that I'm not going to be able to miss. And I hope all our Guilty Feminist listeners are going to be just as excited as I am by this brand new podcast, Media Storm.